I will be honest, there are very few characters like Xiaomao. She is literally the definition of not like the other girls for me. So the best part about reading the Apothecary Diaries is never knowing what Mama will say or do. The novel is filled with her shenanigans and she has this weird sense of humor that always cracks me up. And she does go through character development, but I'm so glad the writer keeps her unpredictably funny throughout the volumes. Alright, so here are some of my favorite Maomao being Maomao scenes from light novel 3 to 5. First one is from light novel 3. So in the Rare Palace, a caravan from the west introduced a massive crate for perfume oil, and every palace woman seemed to wear different scent. While each fragrance might have been pleasant alone, together they created an overwhelming blend of smells. Mama, with her sensitive nose, found it unbearable. One day while doing laundry, Mama noticed the clothes reeked of rose-scented perfume. As she bumped into a maid, and the clothes in her basket fell directly on her. The scent triggered a thought. She recently made rose water, but hadn't used it because it was harmful to the pregnant woman. She plucked the clothing off her head and gave the outfit a good sniff. That alarmed the maid. Those were dirty clothes. But Mama ignored her and that reasonable thought in her head, tossing the outfit into the laundry basket and shoving her face into another one. Now nearby eunuchs and other serving women were watching her in amusement, but did she care? Not in the slightest. She was long gone, lost in her head. She went from one basket to the next, smelling like the cat she was. By the time she was done, it had completely slipped her mind to take her own washing clothes back home. Instead, she headed off somewhere else. Mama, of all people, knew where the trends were most likely to take root. That day, the shouting of ladies in waiting of the Crystal Pavilion could be heard all over the Rare Palace. And the same evening, Jinshi appeared at the Jade Pavilion with a written protest. He was clearly displeased with her antics. "I took you for someone with a little more restraint," Jinshi said, his tone now tinged with anger. "I mean, I am," Mama thought, but it was too late. A great deal of proof was required in order to turn speculation into certainty. The Crystal Pavilion had been the perfect place to get it, and Mama had, one might say, scrambled to her curiosity. "My apologies, I let the excitement get away with me, and did it without asking their permission." "You sound like an old lag making excuses for himself," he shot back. What she did could be considered as perverted, but she had her reasons. Though that was the last thing Mama wanted to hear from a certified actual lag. But for the time being, she kept her eyes on the ground and tried to look guilty and regretful. "Next time I'll be sure to ask before I go smelling things," she says. "But why were you smelling them?" Jinshi still sounded deeply upset, even a bit annoyed. Anyways, Mama had learned her lesson. Specifically, she had learned that she was going to need to check with people before she grabbed their clothes and start sniffing. She'd learned not to let her excitement cause her to practically tear the garments off of people so she could smell them. And she'd definitely learned not to choose the ladies in waiting of the Crystal Pavilion as the subject of her sniffing. I mean, they already treat her like a demon or an evil spirit, but now they seem to consider her as something even worse. Mama explained that she had her reason for her unusual behavior, that she had detected a combination of scents, rose, benzoin, cinnamon, and others, all of which, though harmless in small dose, could be very harmful to a pregnancy in a larger dose. She told them that if Consort Gyokyo, who was pregnant, come into contact with these substances, it could be dangerous. Their conversation then shifted to the caravan's merchandise, which included spices like pepper and jasmine tea. These too, Mama explained, could be risky. Jasmine tea, for example, could cause contraction, and peppers were sometimes used as an agent for abortion. Mama suggests warning the other consort as well as a precaution. Someone was obviously trying to harm one of the consort, and you can guess which one. Even Jinshi asked if she thought that the poison was being smuggled in, but Mama stayed quiet because she couldn't be sure. Later, Mama prepared some jasmine tea for herself to enjoy some peaceful time by herself. But the peace was ruined as a gorgeous voice said from above her, "I thought this was supposed to be poisonous, no?" She looked up to see a face as pretty as the voice, lit by a single paper lantern that burned in the kitchen. "Many poisons have medical properties in small quantities," she replied. "A single cup of tea would barely have any effect of any kind. Anyhow, this is a kitchen, hardly the sort of place you belong, Master Jinshi," she asked, not trying to sound annoyed. "Don't quibble," he said. "Where's Master Kaoshun?" She changed the topic. "I sent him to deliver a message." The eunuch status didn't stop Mama from pursing her lips at him. Then she took a sip, enjoying the way the tea tasted. She knew it was rude not to offer Jinshi anything, but it was after hour. Time for him to go home, she thought. Besides, Mama added, "I'm not pregnant." True enough, for some reason Jinshi glanced away from her as he spoke. It's these little details that confirms how shy Jinshi actually is. He always gets flustered easily, while Mama barely blushes. Now he was sitting diagonally across from her. "Not going to give me any tea?" he asked, eyeing her cup and the flower. "What kind of tea would you like, sir?" Momo stood, grumbling silently about what a headache he could be. "Maybe you like a nice, simple white tea?" Jinshi continued steadying her glass. "I'd like to try some of this. I'm afraid that's the last of it." She poured the first deep into her glass. She could add more hot water, but all Jinshi would get would be dregs. "I don't mind. What other effect does this tea have?" Jinshi shifted in his chair, looking at the leaves. "It encouraged relaxation, for one thing. It helped with insomnia, but can also help one wake up. Additionally, while it isn't recommended during pregnancy, I heard that it could be very helpful during childbirth," she explained. "It seems the benefits far outweighed the harms," he replied. "Yes, which is why people often lose sight of them," she said and asked, "Will white tea do?" She clearly wanted him to get out. Jinshi looked a bit put out and said nothing. But it wasn't her fault. They didn't have what they didn't have. Mama set the kettle on fire again and put some leaves in a small teapot. She poured the tea into a teacup and placed it in front of Jinshi. He took it, still looking annoyed. Mama, meanwhile, made a show of picking up her glass of jasmine tea. "There's another condition this tea can help with," she said. "What's that?" he asked. "Impotence, particularly in men," she joked. Jinshi fixed her with a truly unamused look. Oops, she thought. Her sarcasm had worked a little too well. She busted over to the shelf to get some snack in hopes of repairing his mood, feeling a droplet of cold sweat run down her back. It's a good thing that he doesn't take her jokes seriously. I, however, always find myself giggling at them. Behind her, she heard him sipping tea. Then he said, "This isn't really for me. I'm going home." And just like that, he left. Now I've done it, she thought, scowling to herself. When she wanted to get his cup, though, she discovered it was untouched. Instead, her jasmine tea, from which she'd only taken a single sip from, was half empty. She drank every drop of that white tea furiously. Next, we see her being stubborn little girl as she straight up denies Jinshi as a functioning man. You might already know this one since it's a bit hyped up. It's in the light novel 3-2 and it's from the chapter The Hunt, where Jinshi takes Maomao back from Gyokyo to accompany him to the trip to Shioko province at Chishu's invitation along with Gaoshun and Basin. He was there to attend a gathering where he had to cover his face, not eating or drinking anything. He soon stepped out to get some air with Maomao following behind him on Gaoshun's signal. Shortly after entering the trees, she spotted a figure leaning against one of the trunks. She was about to say Jinshi, but clapped a hand over her mouth before the name could come out. He was disguising himself again with another name. "It's you," a strained voice said from behind the mask. "You need to take this off," she said and began to take his mask off, but Jinshi restricted. "I can't." "Of course you can, there's no one here," she pressed. "Wasn't that why he'd come all the way out here?" "But someone might come," says the guy who openly carries her and mess around with her. "If you're that worried about somebody seeing you, then you just need to go somewhere nobody will," she said with frustration. Suddenly, the ground around their feet exploded. He realized that someone was shooting at them. He pulled Maomao close, and there was this waterfall near them, so he took her with him, saying, "Sorry, this is going to be a little dramatic," and jumped straight into it. Maomao had fainted, and when she gained consciousness, she felt firm pressure against her mouth, then her chest. She sat up, coughing out all the water. She felt someone gently rubbing her soaked back. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you couldn't swim," he said. "No one could swim in that," she managed to say despite her bloodless face and lips. "The basin here is deep," he said, "so as long as you manage to land in it, you should survive, assuming that you don't drown." "Big assumptions," Maomao replied. When he saw how angry she was, he found himself not looking at her. Not caring, Maomao stood up and loosened her robe, which was soaked thoroughly and was very heavy. What are you doing?" he stuttered. She was drying her clothes, obviously, because she didn't want it to catch a cold. He did the same, and by the time they were done, she realized that Jinshi hadn't eaten anything. So she gave him a snack that she had carried. Though it was soaked, but he needed the salt in him or he'd probably faint. As he eats, Maomao's own stomach rolls and he shared the snack with her. Now to get out, they could either swim past the waterfall or try to reach the opening of the cave, which was pretty high. Jinshi suggested that she climb on his shoulders and get out first. Maomao agrees after some restraint and decides to give it a try. It was slippery and she was already losing her balance, and when a frog jumped out on her head, she falls down. But she didn't felt any pain because she had fallen on top of Jinshi. Soon it hits her, the realization that Jinshi is not actually a eunuch since he had all his body parts intact. Now he wanted to tell her his real identity for a while, but in her mind, knowing that a fully functioning man stays in the inner palace near the emperor's concubines, she knew she would get in trouble with this information. She wanted to plug her ears. He had used her intelligence for various things, but she thought this was different. Once she had this knowledge, she would have to take it to her grave. I'm not ready to follow you to my grave. She didn't say it out loud, obviously, but it was clear that she was not going to accept that he was not a eunuch. So instead, she said, I'm very sorry, sir. I'm afraid I might have crushed a frog. She kept her face completely expressionless. A frog? Jinshi winced. Fine, let him wince. Mama would overcome this situation by sheer force of her will. Yes, sir, a frog. I apologize again. It dropped on me from above and made me lose my balance. You aren't hurt, are you? There was no frog, he begins to say, but she cut him off. I'm terribly sorry. I know you took the brunt of the fall for me. Let's get out of here quickly. She tried to stand up, but Jinshi wouldn't let go of her. Master Jinshi, would you move your hands? Who are you calling a frog? Jinshi sat up, still holding her in place, so that they ended up facing each other. As I said, she could be very stubborn, and when she goes in that denial mode, there was nothing that could be done to change her mind. She kept repeating that it was a frog and nothing else. He tried to argue back, but Mama wouldn't be Mama if there was no stubbornness, and Jinshi wouldn't be Jinshi if he wouldn't react to her in the most dramatic way. They glared at each other for long seconds, then almost a minute. Jinshi blinked and looked away. Did I win? Mama asked herself with a sigh of relief. But suddenly he goes on top of her and she wonders if she had finally pushed all his buttons. As he leaned forward, she wonders if she could kick him, but before something happened and the situation escalated more between them, she heard Lihaku's dog and whistled to him. He comes and saves them. Gaoshun along with others help them get out and they get back home safely. At the house, Jinshi apologized for crossing the line and Mama apologizes too. They stood on different sides of the door, but he opened the door slightly and gave her a gift, which he was saving for the time when he would tell her who he actually was. I'm sure you can guess what it would be. The ox bezoar that she wanted. She forgives and forgets, comes out to thank him, and goes to lay down on her bed to daydream about her precious gift. While Jinshi stayed outside her door, his secret about being the emperor's brother stayed a secret. Now, there aren't many places where Mama has shown her stubbornness and quirkiness, but there are surely times where even Jinshi can seem to get her. The next one is from Volume 4, where she had been kidnapped by the Shi clan, or rather, Lalan and her sister Suiri. So the two sisters have this very evil mother. She claimed to love Lalan and hate her half-older sister, Suiri. When she met Mama, Lalan had introduced her as an apothecary who was above 30 and had learned to make the elixir of immortality. So Shenmei, their mother, had accepted her and given her a room to stay, more or less like a prisoner. She was allowed to go out only once a day, though she was provided with whatever was necessary to make the drug of slow aging. One day, like always, Mama was sitting in her cluttered little room, surrounded by the smell of rats and a faint stink of some mysterious chemical experiment from the lower floors. For her, life had settled into an exhausting routine, mixing, testing, and trying not to let Shenmei unpredictable rot land on her. I guess this isn't any easy for you than it's for me, she said to the rats one day. While they were there to purely have drugs tested on them, they were still fed regularly. According to the last apothecary's material, rats generally lived about 3 years, maybe 4 in some exceptional individual cases. So for the immorality elixir to actually work, she had to make them pass their lifetime. I'm sure as hell not going to be here for 4 years, she thought. Just then there was a sound, and she saw something on the ground by the doorframe. She spotted a piece of paper. Curious, she picked it up and unfolded it to reveal a messy handwriting, the kind you'd expect from a kid. Run for it. I'll draw off the guards. Along with the note was a small thin wire looped into a circle. Mama guessed who the culprit was. It was Kyu, one of the children of the Shi clan. Maybe he had realized that she was a hostage. She appreciated the kid's effort, but honestly, the wire was too flimsy. She already had better tools in her stash to break out of the door. But what then? She didn't have anywhere to go. They were on a completely different island. Before she could think of what to do next, Kyu's voice echoed through the door. Let go, let me go. His plan has already failed. The guard must have caught him not long after Mama was dragged out of her room and made to stand before Suiri. When asked, Kyu simply said, "What do you mean?" Trying to play dumb. Suiri gave him a cold look, then turned to Mama. You put him up to this, didn't you? Whatever do you mean? Mama asked, discreetly crushing the piece of paper in her hand. Oh, that's it. I was just playing like usual when I saw that the guard was slacking off. That's what happened. Kyu was lying and Mama figured her best bet was to play along. So it was really nothing. Then listen, I never want nothing to happen again, she warned them. The guard still looked less than pleased, but at least it was over, Mama thought. Except it wasn't. Goodness, what's all this? Mama felt a shock of fear raise goose flesh all over her body. Suiri's color got worse and worse as the sound approached, and she wasn't alone. Kyu and the guard both went pale as well. Shinmei asked what was going on, and Suiri said, "Nothing that wants your attention, ma'am." No, by all means, tell me. I'm most interested as to why the apothecary is not in her room, she said. It was obvious that the half-baked excuse weren't going to fly with Shinmei. Soiri came back to reality and said, I'm given to understand that Kyu was playing outside this room here and distracted the guard. And I was asking the apothecary for her perspective on the events. That won't do. If you don't behave, then we'll have to discipline you. She stood in front of Kyu and stroked his cheek, the sharp jade nail caps on her fingers jabbing his soft skin. Lady Shinmei, Soiri began, but she stopped mid-sentence. Go on. Kyu is only a child, and he did nothing of any consequences. She trailed off, her voice growing quieter and quieter. Kyu was still watching Lulan, who had a vacant look in her eyes. Shinmei cocked her head. Well, but that must mean someone here made a very big fuss out of a very little thing. Her gaze moved to the guard. Certainly not, ma'am, he said. In her mind, Maomao could almost see the cruel twisting of Shinmei's mouth where it was hidden behind her folding fan. Perhaps some time in the water prison to think about what you've done, she declared. Now Maomao could simply let it pass, but she ain't that type of a girl. She doubted Shinmei cared about the reason. She just enjoyed tormenting people. Maomao wanted nothing more to do with her, but at the same time, people like Shinmei pissed her off. Maybe that's why she was speaking before she could stop herself. You old witch. The words slipped quietly from her mouth, but Shinmei seemed to hear them quite clearly. Almost before she knew what had happened, Maomao was flying sideways, her ear and template throbbing. When she fought back the pain enough to open her eyes, she saw the ugly witch with beetroot face, her fan upraised. This confirms it, I'm an idiot. But her idiocy wasn't over just yet. I told the boy to do it, she said, making her even more angrier. But Maomao had plenty of experience with cruel old women. Her problem was that this cruel old woman knew no restraint. Next, the fan came down hard on her shoulder. Another worthless apothecary, I see. Shinmei spat at her, while Maomao held her shoulder. Very well, perhaps we can inspire some repentance. Put her in the water prison. Yep, I'm in trouble now. She brought it on herself. Bought it and paid for it. But there was another idiot there just like Maomao. But Lady Shinmei, we will be without an apothecary again, Soiri had said. Shinmei looked at her, and she stepped forward as if to say more. But the fan came down promptly on her shoulder. Don't move without being told. My sincere apologies, milady. However, she began again. The fan came down on her again, this time on her forehead, where it split the skin, producing a trickle of red blood. She's so grossly evil, and her hatred goes far and beyond. Lulan finally stepped up behind her mother, calling, Dearest mother, since we went all the trouble of having it made ready, I want to use, It's been so long since we put it to good use. What's, Mama wondered. The way Lulan spoke made it sound deeply significant. Yes, let's go with that today, Shinmei said with a smile. She glanced at the two guards with her. They each took one of Mamao's arms and dragged her away. The Taibun was a torture room where the guards had left after opening a mysterious box, and Mama began to laugh after seeing what come out of that box. What beautiful creatures, she thought. Still laughing, Mama took the hair stick from her hair and also the hairpin from the folds of her robe. From the box exploded countless snakes and poisonous bugs. There was one thing clear, that she wouldn't be afraid of this punishment, because I thought that she could just kill them. But our girl had killed the snake and was grilling it up to eat it, though she did miss the salt to its taste. She mumbles, I really want some salt. That's when she realized that there was a man standing before her, looking stunned. What are you doing? I'm eating. You wouldn't happen to have an salt, would you? She asked. Of course I won't have any damn salt. Well, it had been a long shot, admittedly, and I don't think people just carry salt around with them. What are you, eating? He asked. Snake, sir. She said it like it was the most normal thing, and stuffed the rest of the cooked meat in her mouth and swallowed. I thought it was supposed to be a torture chamber, the guard said, and I suppose for some it would be a living hell. But she was Mama, and Lulan knew her too well. That's why she had suggested this torture method to her mother. And later Mama even thanked her for this treat. Honestly, I miss their dynamic. It was so weirdly perfect in its own way, and I really, really hope that we get to see her again someday. Anyways, the last two scenes. They got me rolling on the floor, and they're from the light novel 5. They might not get animated, but they were way too fun to read. So in the start of volume 5, we get to know that Mama was not living with Jinshi anymore, and he had to visit her at the Pleasure District to fill her in with the latest updates. I'm certain it was just an excuse. He probably just wanted to recharge. So one time when he visited her after a long time, he looked tired, and Mama couldn't help but notice the fatigue in his face, the bag under his eyes, hinting that he hadn't rested properly in days. With her usual bluntness, Mama insisted he takes a break. Master Jinshi, wouldn't you like to rest? I'll prepare a bedroom immediately. I want you to sleep. You want me to sleep in a place like this? He asked. I mean, it's not very suitable for someone like Jinshi to even be seen in a place like this. But of course, it was Mama who was making the offer, so he couldn't really refuse. She jokes a bit, saying, "Can sleep on your own?" thinking maybe that he would resent being spoken to like a child. Though before she could add, "That's a joke," he cuts her off, saying, No, I can't. Now I know for a fact what was going on in Jinshi's head, but our girl had different plans in mind. She asked the madam to prepare everything while she served him tea. Then she led him upstairs to a luxurious room in the verdigrease house. "You may rest here, sir. Work is important, but you must take care of yourself," she said, though she half expected the madam to simply shoot her down, but the old lady seemed to have some kind of a plan. So she offered the establishment's best room for free, and she'd gotten it ready in 30 minutes. An impressive display, Mama had thought. Maybe she'd figure it would be best to make a good impression on a member of the nobility. "If you want to bathe, a medical bath is ready for you. If you'd like pajamas, you can use these." Mama handed him a set of soft cotton sleepwear. Jinshi looked surprised at first, but his smile grew progressively more gentle. God, he's so delusional. I love it. He said, "I believe I shall bathe," and headed for the adjoining bath. Mama felt a wave of relief and noticed a frowning Gaoshon in the corner of the room. His looks were somewhat softened, and yet he also seemed uneasy. "I shan't be sleeping alone," Jinshi repeated. "No, you shan't, sir," Mama replied. But when he opened the door to the bath with an unexplained expression, he immediately slammed it shut again and rushed back to Mama. The mask he was wearing was back in its place. He demanded why there were women in his bath. "No need to worry, sir. They're professionals," she told him, because she thought that he could hardly peel his tangerines, so she figured bathing himself was out of the question. She asked him if he doesn't like massages, and he asked if they stop with just that. They obviously don't. "Still going to have the bath, sir?" She wanted to confirm. "Thank you, I'll pass," he says. "Change of clothes? I can do it myself." Jinshi took off his overgarments and pointedly pulled on the sleepwears on his own, while Mama took a cup and a small teapot from the bedside and poured something for Jinshi. He tilted his mask up and took a drink. "Sleeping medicine or something?" he asked Mama. "It contained nutrition to boost your energy, sir," she replied, and Jinshi spat out the tea, drenching Mama with it. She couldn't help giving him a bit of a scowl. "Why in the world would you give me that?" he asked. "I've heard it's the most effective remedy when a man is tired." And that's when it hits him that Mama was actually setting him up. The look on his face was a mixture of disgust and shyness. Maybe there's some problem with me being so direct, Mama thought. While Jinshi couldn't seem to look Mama in the eye, she continued, "So what kind of a woman would you prefer?" "Huh?" he said stupidly. Mama clapped twice, causing a group of 5 stunning ladies to file in from another room. Each of them looked sweet and innocent. "Lady Soren told me you preferred them your age," Mama explained. Poor Jinshi was caught off guard. He simply stared at her, his mouth hanging open in disbelief, which was obvious even behind his mask. And Gaoshun, who was first holding his hat, was now pressing his forehead against the wall. "Are none of them to your liking?" she asked, and Jinshi moved as awkwardly as a puppet. Looking at Mama, he said, "I just want to sleep. Please let me rest." "I see, sir. Then just pick a woman, any of them. I mean, literally," he exclaimed. He was now completely done with Mama and her shenanigans. Her shoulders slumped, and all the courtesans left the room. So now Mama went over to Gaoshun, whose shoulders were even slumpeder than hers, and said, "Would you like them then, sir? I have a wife, a scary wife, and my daughter is something of a stickler for cleanliness," he said. "Ah, of course. Maybe it wasn't the best idea to offer a courtesan to a married man," she thought. "Do you know what it's like to be told, 'Papa, you're filthy. You have to bathe class tonight?'" he asked, remembering. "Yes, sir, I do." She knew how his daughter might have felt because she does this with her own father. Not Lumin, but Lacan. A bit more times to get him off her back. She did feel bad for him and offered a nice sofa to sit on, pointing out that there was another bedroom and indeed another entire room available. But Gaoshun politely turned her down. If anything, he was worried that a divorce might be in the offering if he were ever to discovered in a place like this. Mama went back to where Jinshi was now laying down and pulled the covers over him. When she went to leave the room herself, she felt him holding onto her arm. "Surely you can at least spare a lullaby," he says. She didn't say anything at first. She wanted to tell him no, but he was looking at her with those puppy dog eyes he got sometimes. And anyways, after all the excitement with the bath and the courtesans and everything, it seemed this little break hadn't helped him feel refreshed at all. He refused to let her go, and she let out a sigh. "I'm not a good singer," she informs, but he said he didn't care. So gently tapping the covers to keep time, Mama began to sing, an old children's song that the courtesans used to sing to her. It wasn't long at all before she heard Jinshi's breathing take on even rhythm of sleep. Honestly, my heart gets all warm and fuzzy every time I read these type of scenes of them. Still, Mama should at least get a hint. Poor Jinshi nearly had a stroke. And her shenanigans don't end here. The other times when he'd come to her with a problem of increasing grasshoppers and insect plague that couldn't seem to be controlled, she had advised that maybe if people start to eat them, they will decrease, while he listened to her, completely frozen. Perhaps you could consider that a last resort, he said. It was clear that he didn't like the idea of eating them. I mean, who would? Apart from Mama, maybe. A bit of a smile come on her face, causing Jinshi to freeze again. Master Jinshi? She called him. Yes? What is it? He managed, stuttering just a little. Will you have a meal before you go back? Mama said politely. Now she was grinning. So it was that Jinshi decided to have dinner before he left. And Mama had produced the remaining grasshoppers. She didn't intend to make him eat them. It was just a bit of a joke. She had every intention of taking them away again the moment Jinshi seemed even the least bit upset by her jest. However, Mama grabbed one of her chopsticks and pretended to feed it to him with uncharacteristic gesture. Jinshi watched her silently. Okay, maybe that's enough, she thought. But just then, Jinshi with only some hesitation took a bite of the grasshoppers Mama had offered him as a joke. She felt herself cringe and she wasn't even the one eating it. To watch Jinshi knit his eyebrows and chew away was to feel that one was seeing something that shouldn't be seen. It was different in its way from the time she had witnessed him made up like a woman, but still it felt like something that shouldn't even exist in this world. Everyone else present seemed to have the same sense. They'd look as if they had struck by a collective lightning bolt. Gaoshun's hands were shaking. The apprentice who'd bought the meal looked like she might burst into tears, as if she'd drop her favorite doll in the mud. Zhao Yu, who had come along to snatch some food, was frowning profoundly and shaking his head as if to say, "This is bad news." Even the madam wore a look of distaste. Jinshi ignored them all as he chewed and swallowed. He still looked profoundly disturbed, but he turned his eyes on Mama. "Kongi?" Right away, sir." She held out a ball of kongi to him, but Jinshi made no move to take it. Instead, he looked from the kongi to Mama and back. The lunch he'd go through to be babied by her. It was so cute and funny the first time I'd read it, and it still is. And he doesn't even stop at just one bite. She kept feeding him the grasshoppers and he kept on obediently eating them, though he didn't look like he was enjoying the taste. I think that was the last time he had visited her before he had sent a letter to her and they left for the west, leading us to their travel adventures, where she had shocked everyone by making a bet on her life for a drinking competition. The video for this, along with the little tale of their travel, is in the description. You can check it out if you like. That will be all for today. Thank you for listening to me. Take care of yourself and goodbye.
No, you'll never be the same. I don't really wanna hurt you, but I can't control the pain. If you're sticking by my side, maybe we could be okay. Okay, maybe you could be the change.